Hello and welcome to this edition of the New Indian Express Online. I'm Bansy, Kalappa. With me is a very well-known expert on labor laws. We have with us Professor Babu Mathew from the National Law School. Welcome on the show.
Thank you,
Professor.
thank you.
First of all, the governments now are looking at the number of working hours. They're saying that the 8-hour shifts that most of us had accepted as a norm is not good enough. So they are looking at, this Factories Act, and they're looking at increasing the number of working hours. Some of them suggesting that 14 hours is okay. Some of them suggesting per day 15 hours is okay. So, as an expert on labor law, what do you have to say?
Yeah, I'm very glad that you brought in the Factories Act. In a sense, it's the Factories Act which lays down the standard, and that standard has evolved not overnight but over many decades. And after experiencing working conditions, it's the experts who stepped in. We must remember that it is no less a person than Dr. Ambedkar who moved the amendment to the Factories Act, and in 1945 the 8-hour condition was introduced. And it's so widely accepted that it became the norm everywhere. Even though there are other legislations that deal with working hours, the standard bearer was indeed the Factories Act. And that is why during recent period, both the central government and thereafter some state governments started diluting the standard working hours. It is now slowly spreading to other pieces of legislation also, like the Shops and Establishments Act, about which my colleague Madhulika has done a lot of research and will be able to come in at the appropriate stage. So yes, it's a sad development that the political leadership in many parts of India has not realized the value of 8 hours work as a standard norm.
Okay. Now, there is a relevant history of this. So, because 8 hours did not come out of the blue, because, in the late 1600s and 1700s, we know of, places like the now present United Kingdom and other places having 12 hours of work and sometimes 13, 14 hours of work. But all of them shrunk it to 8 hours. What is the relevant history of the standard work,
Yes,
norm?
I'm glad you asked that, because I think the single most important contributing factor towards moving towards 8 hours is what is referred to as the May Day struggle. And the May Day struggle started in Chicago, where there were unlimited hours of work. And there's a famous incident known as the Haymarket Square incident. That is when the workers get together and begin to ask for the 8-hour day. And the powers that be, they go down heavily on the workers, and there is even a view that agent provocators threw a bomb into the crowd, upset the place, and then police opened firing. Many people died, but as a result of it, the international community went up in anger, and then all over the world, May Day was observed as a day on which 8 hours work must be observed. But what is most interesting is during the period of this shift to 8 hours, or the struggle for that shift, people argued, and that argument I think is very important, that a day consists of 24 hours and the day must be broken up into 3 parts. 8 hours for work, 8 hours for sleep, rest, recreation, and another 8 hours for study. So this 8 hours is not an artificial thing. It is the realization that if you allow people to work for only 8 hours, then you get the best results. It's a wrong assumption that productivity can be increased indefinitely by carrying on for 10 and 12 hours.
Absolutely. Also, certain nations of the world, like we see France or certain other nations, they're shrinking from that 8-hour work norm to lesser. Some of them looking at 7 hours, some of them looking at even 6 hours. But here, are we going in the opposite direction?
Yes, we are certainly going in the opposite direction. And very often the pressure to move in the opposite direction is mounted by multinational corporations. The same multinationals who are part of reducing the working day in France would come to India and try and double the working hours. So these are guys who have no compunction on creating very difficult working conditions for workers, and the desire to maximize profits is by extending the working day as much as possible.
Also, there is this issue of industrialists threatening. It's like, holding a gun at the government and saying, if you don't increase the number of working hours, we pull out. So there's always the hungry states all around us. We have Telangana that's so hungry for investment. We've seen Tamil Nadu so hungry. We've seen Gujarat. So does this hold any water when an industrialist says, increase the number of working hours or we pull out all our investments?
I think this is a very big misnomer. It has been paraded in the name of ease of doing business. We did some research into what is ease of doing business. Those who promote this idea, they maintain an index to measure what is the level of ease of doing business in one country after another. And they've identified 10 criteria. None of those 10 criteria deal with labor. So this is an invention of the capitalist class, and they have but successfully done propaganda, so much so many of our states have accepted that, and they believe that working day...
Thanks to largely uneducated politicians.
That's true. And they have no...
They buy almost anything they
Yes.
say.
So their notion of social justice is questionable. What is more important than providing a decent working day? So that is attacked again and again. And I think it's also a paper tiger. Multinationals threaten, but I don't think any one of them will carry out their threats because their presence in a particular state is in search of profits. And only when they are sure of maximizing their profits do they come here. Of course, if you give them a rope which is easy to handle, then they don't mind. They will be willing to go to 16 hours of work also.
Thank you. There it is, Professor Babu Mathew, who's a very well-known expert on labor, telling us that this talk of 14, 15, 16 hours of work per day, it's really difficult. Will the government listen? These are questions before us. Thank you for joining us on this program.
Thank you.